Cool. So welcome to IO Music Academy. My name is Adam. That's Andy, our founder over there. I'm a co-founder. You'll see Zach, maybe Josh around, or one of our team members. So who here has been here before? Were you here for maybe last year's workshop also? Anybody? Okay, cool. Which one did you come to? Nice. Okay. So yeah, we're a music production school, obviously here in Hollywood. We have this really beautiful space. We also have studios downstairs. And yeah, if you're interested in music production courses, probably not the DJ classes, come talk to us after. We got lots going on. So today, we're going to talk about making DJ edits, and we're going to take that from something very approachable and very simple all the way into something a little fuzzier, into more remix territory, into something original, all the different ways you can push it. So yeah, I'm one half of a duo called Joluca. Been making house music and DJing with my friend Dave for better part of 7 years. Played EDC this year, just DJ'd a lot. I'm actually from Canada, but I moved here a long time ago. And yeah, so DJ'd here and in Canada a lot. So I'm coming at this from an angle definitely of like a very kind of house music side. Like I really love house music, kind of underground house and techno. And for me, a lot of the time making edits was a reason, or because I had old songs I wanted to play, and they just like kind of didn't work with the newer stuff I was playing, and like I still really wanted to play them. There's all different kinds of approaches we can talk about, and like why you might come to making an edit and what that might mean for you. So just know that that's the angle I'm coming at it from, but we'll definitely speak to something a little more universal. So part one, just like what and why. So feel like, what is an edit? Why would you want to make one? It could be anything from really, really simple, just like rearranging a track or like extending the intro and outro, all the way to something that's more of like a bootleg remix where you're adding in, you know, original music or original composition, or maybe changing the mix of the track or trying to modernize it, you know, make it louder or add EQ. A lot of different reasons we might want to make an edit. Like I said, one of the big ones would just be to what we call quantize, which we'll talk about, older songs to make them easier to beat match or easier to sync or easier to perform with. Make songs just like kind of fit into your set better. Also, there's a lot of tracks that are really great that just have one really, really whack part in it that I want to take out, you know? Maybe it's like the feature of verse 2 or like the bridge, and you're just like, oh, no. Also, you can use them for like special stuff that's just for you, or you could share it, of course, maybe to get from like one tempo to another, or like a special moment in your set. Also to create mashups, that's kind of like going into something more original. We're taking two different tracks, mashing them together, or doing like a blend that you couldn't really do live on the decks or wouldn't make sense to pursue. And then also, yeah, beef up older tracks. Does that all track? Does anyone else also like, who here has made an edit before? Cool. Why did you make the edit?
Because I like 2 songs.
And
I made song.
yeah.
We're going to pause for just a sec. 2 things. Forgot to do an announcement. Can you turn on Switcher Studio on your desktop?
Yeah.
We'll edit this part out. And then when you have a question, raise your hand. I'll come give you a microphone. And you can then ask the question so we can capture the question for the recording. Everyone got that?
Yes. Sure. A sec. Sorry, 1 second, grabbing it now.
Sorry, I forgot to do one thing before we started.
Cool. Sorry, I have to give it permission. 1 sec.
It's not letting me load your desktop.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, 1 sec. It's because I was recording it locally and it really broke it. Sorry, everybody. Give me 1 sec. Hello. Cool.
We're just about to restart because we had some technical issues, guys. So if you want to come on in, maybe grab a seat there. There's 2 seats over there.
Cool. Okay. There, you should be able to access it now if you want to request it. Just give it, it's quitting. It's reopening. There. You want to make sure it's display 2.
Display 2? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I got it. Okay.
All right.
You can resume whenever.
Cool. Do you want to hand the mic?
Yeah, and then everyone who just arrived, if you have a question, let me know. We'll have those 2 mics floating around. We want to be able to capture your questions on the recording. And if anyone has any problem being on a recording, maybe come back here if you don't want to be captured on the screen, on the cameras. Since, it's probably just from here forward that we're going to be capturing video. All right, cool. Everyone? All right, let's resume.
Cool. So you've made an edit. Why did you make an edit? You're not going to hear it. It's cool. You're still talking to it.
I made an edit because I like the instrumental of one song and the vocals of another, and that's why I made an edit.
Cool. So you made a mashup.
Yeah.
Nice. Anybody else? Hand it over there. That's cool. Hand it that way.
I made a remix of a song that I really liked. It was really slow. I really liked the vocals, and so I just added my own beats to it.
Cool. So yeah, I feel like often when I go to edit a track, I can like easily, in a good way, kind of like get lost in it and continue making changes, and you end up with something a lot more original. But yeah, today we're gonna take it from the beginning and like what you need to get going, and then from there. So what we need to make an edit. This is ideal. You may not always have this option. So the first step is you need the actual track. You're all DJs, you're used to downloading tracks. So we want the highest quality version we can find, because the more, we're gonna mangle it, we're gonna maybe slow it down or speed it up or stretch it, or maybe even like use some kind of software to like separate the vocal or instrumental or something. So for this, we want to make sure that we have, if you're used to downloading MP3s, you want to make sure you download like a CD quality version or even higher. Higher the better, because again, we're going to be really messing with it. So the more material we have, the better off you are. I do a lot of stuff from like vinyl. I'll like rip vinyl that isn't available digitally and like make edits that way. So that's also, I try to have like the best signal chain I can recording the record. And that's also going to be important. So some like non-Beatport or like non-record pool places to download stuff. I really like this store. It's a French download store called Kobu's, and they have like, for non-DJ songs, they have like a really amazing library of stuff, especially like older music that you might not be able to find on like stuff you would never find on Beatport, but it's like you want to find this like disco song from 1979, like this will probably have it in a really high quality. And then you also need some kind of software. So I'm going to use Ableton Live. I think that's probably the easiest, most straightforward software to get into making edits. And it's actually a really great way to learn about production and learn about making original music, is interacting with edits, and something that's pre-existing and remixing is a great gateway. And then skills, I like rank these as kind of difficulty of what you need to get going. You need to know how to warp the audio, which we're going to like talk about today. You need this. For sure. There's no way around it. There's no other thing. You need to know how to do this, and we'll talk about it. And then if you want to do more, maybe you learn how to like automate some stuff, so make some changes over time. We'll talk about that. Maybe you want to layer and add some new drums, so that'd be like starting to add some original material in. And then getting more advanced, you're like starting to maybe make changes to the highs, the mids, the lows, or more detailed. Maybe you're like cutting out harsh sounds or boosting the bass. And then later on, like maybe you're actually adding like new musical layers to it, to make it either more modern or like more fit your genre, your style, and you're just, you're adding new stuff in the mix. So does that all make sense? Any question? Who here has Ableton or a DAW installed on their laptop? Hell yeah, okay. So some examples. These are some examples I picked out that were great. And I think just so that we're on the same page, I'll play you some. So really great one from like a couple years ago. Really cool indie band from Canada, actually, Men I Trust. So you've probably heard this track, I would imagine. Everyone know this song-ish? So track is super vibey, really great track. Not something I would play, you know, in the middle of a set probably. And these guys, Odin and Fatso, did a really sick edit that ended up getting released officially. I feel like this is a really great edit of something older. And I'll play the edit first, and we're gonna listen to an Allstate commercial together. Because the track's not on Spotify. Wow, internet's struggling. Okay. So this is a good example of like a pure kind of DJ edit, which is taking a little bit of the track and really kind of making a whole track out of that versus playing the entire song and, you know, just making it DJ friendly. Cool, so like really great one, and just takes like the littlest bit of the track from this track. And I think once you also, since you all like interact with music a lot on a regular basis, you know, like hearing samples and like hearing where those samples are and looking at the original track is just, I don't know, a really fun experience and great way to learn more about the music you like. Has anyone ever been on Who's Sampled? Okay, yeah, so it'll ruin a lot of your favorite songs, to be honest, yeah? Because you're just like, this song is so good, whoever made it's a genius, and then you'll go look up the sample and you're like, oh, it's the person who made it 30 years ago. But, so yeah, this track, really great one, and there's like, you know, there's a million. Is anyone familiar with Headliner across the hallway? The record pool? So they do they have tons of edits, a lot of people contribute edits to the record pool. And that's stuff that's going to be like topical stuff to make it easier, you know, for people like you to play in your sets. Cool. So are we everyone on board? We're good? Okay. All right. What, sorry? Oh, yeah. So this is going to be by far the most boring part, and that's why we're going to spend the littlest time on it, even though ironically it is the most important part. So does anyone know what I say when I say warping? Hit me.
Yeah, that's when you're manipulating the audio, so you're either slowing it down, speeding it up, pitching it up or down, but just manipulating the audio.
Yeah.
Stretching it.
That's great. That's 100% right. And so what we're going to need to do is any song we want to work with, we're going to need to bring into the environment of our digital audio workstation, in this case Ableton. And what we're going to need to do is make sure that essentially it's lined up with Ableton's grid. So that we're essentially beat matching the song with Ableton so that we can do things like speed it up and slow it down, add new elements, and it's all going to be in time. Another reason to warp it is like, it will also take a song that maybe was played by a live band and it's not going to be perfectly on time. And you're like, damn, I love this track, but every time I play it, I look like a goof because I train wreck it, you know, not the best vibe. So you might take that track and just line up, say, the first 16 beats or maybe the first 32 bars or maybe the entire track so that you have like, for most people, they'd be listening, for 99% of people or everyone, they would hear it and they would play back the exact same song. But instead of you like needing to adjust it and like panic while you're DJing, it just plays really, really smooth and really nice. And I'll never forget, like, a traumatic DJ memory for me is I was like, I really love this club back home, and the owner is a super great house DJ and a really cool guy, and like I finally got a slot to play, and it was just a humbling moment in so many ways. I was playing like the closing slot, so it was like 1:30 to 2:30, and the guy before me, I just like wasn't really familiar and didn't do my research, and he murdered harder than you could ever do it. Like it was the perfect house disco set where it was just like the whole place was absolutely rocking. It was fucking amazing. I could not have done it. I was like, oh my God. And as he kept playing, and I was like obviously enjoying it, and then I was like, oh no, like I have to follow this up. This is gonna be a nightmare. You know, it's like, oh no, oh no. And I was like, I am not ready. Like I don't have the right music to like follow this up. And I was just like, I knew I was gonna do a bad job, and it was just gonna be so hard. And so I get up there kind of panicking, and I pick my first song, and I just like, I don't know why I picked it, because I knew, but like I forgot in that moment because I was nervous. And it has like, kind of the beginning of the track is like a little bit of a tempo change, and it keeps getting faster and faster, which is like the worst possible thing to start my set on. And so I'm mixing out of Dane's track, who's just destroyed the place, and it's just like such a moment. And I just like, I hit play on that track, realize that I'm too deep in it, I can't switch it, and like I'm just like, it's happening in front of me that like I was like the best crowd that I could ever hope to take over, and just like hitting play, and just like I hear it go off, and then I remembered about the track, and I just like, there's no amount of fixing it, so I'm just like grinding through the outro of his song, and it's just like, it's really noticeable. And I'll just never forget that like the owner of the club happened to be standing right next to the DJ booth. He just looked at me, he's like, brother, what's going on? I was like, oh my God, it's so bad. And then I proceeded to just not do a very good job. So it was a really, honestly, very important and formative experience for me. And also was like, yeah, those songs that don't work when you're practicing and always you fudge are not gonna magically be really good in a really key moment. So I vowed to always, work my tracks from that point on. And yeah, it was it's good, it's important. So when we have a track like that, which there are many, especially when you're playing older music, what we're going to want to do is warp it. And that does come with a slight downside, is that one, you're going to be running it through some kind of algorithm, like Ableton's complex warping algorithm, which undeniably alters the vibe of it a little bit. Most of the time it's imperceptible, but you are like changing it. It's not going to sound, it might, the more you change it as well, the more weird it will sound. So if you have a song that's at like 90 BPM and you're like, I always want to rip this at 130, that's maybe not the best choice for an edit, but also doesn't mean it can't work. Just know that the farther away from the original tempo and kind of the farther out of context you're pushing it, it just, you are in an uphill battle. Like probably the move for me would be like, picking like a realistic outcome of the edit is definitely a good vibe, and kind of forcing something to fit in where it shouldn't, this is never going to work, no matter how many times you try. But sometimes you can get really, really cool kind of results from doing stuff you shouldn't, and it can sound really, really good. So what I'm going to do is we're going to bring in a track, and we're going to I'm just going to show you how I warp it, and this is like 3 classes of our regular programming, so I'm not going to spend like a ton of time, but I'm just going to pick an older track and go from there. Cool. And so, one sec. I'll try and drag it out of Rekordbox. Sorry, because I'm doing the like screen recording, everything is really slow. So let me just get it another way. Show Finder. I'm gonna put my fans on full blast.
Probably don't need screen recording, Adam.
I already took it off, yeah. Just the cast. Cool, so this is like one of my all-time favorite disco tracks, and I'm just gonna play it a little bit. And what I'm gonna do first, the way I do it, is I'll drag it into Ableton's session view, and I have it automatically set up not to warp because I don't want it to guess. Ableton does a pretty terrible job at guessing long files. It's honestly much more worth your time to just do it yourself. If it's a short loop or like a drum sample, it almost always kills it. But for us, this is gonna be the thing. So I'm gonna hit play. This is a perfect example of a song like it's right at the kind of the latest dance music before you start to get a lot of electronic elements, you know? So it's still live. And it also is like I mean, I love all 7 minutes of it, but it might not always be appropriate to drop like, you know, a 7-minute version of this. So I'm coming into this and thinking like, hey, what's a good reason to make this edit? One, even though this is like 4 on the floor, should be pretty easy to mix, it's quite loose. So I want to tighten this up so it's gonna like be easier to beat match. Sorry, my computer is super hot like I am. Let me just close Rekordbox. Jeez. Forward version of the song that's like gonna fit in better. So the first thing I'll usually do is I'll tap the tempo up here in Ableton's transport, and it's important that this is unwarped because otherwise when you're tapping it and it's warped, it will follow that.
Put your computer on that.
To cool down, yeah. Ooh, one sec.
We lost you.
Yeah. Sorry, everybody. Everything is hot today. Weird. Yeah, I think the switcher cast, Andy, is just killing my... I think I might have to stop it.
Why don't you just take a quick break, restart your computer, because then we really need to capture the recording.
Let's see. All right, so I'm going to tap the tempo. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Cool. So looks to be about that. I'm going to double click the track and I'm going to hit warp down here. What it's going to do is it's going to assume that whatever the project tempo was at is the original tempo of this track, and it's going to put it here. And this is just something to always keep in mind is the info that it's giving you is Ableton is kind of saying to you, I'm going to treat this sample or this audio file like the original tempo is 124.21, and it will just play accordingly. It's not inferring like where it starts and like where the beats are or where it's going to line up. It's just saying that, hey, because you told me this, this is the original. If you know the original tempo of the track, say it's like it is an electronic song or something made on a computer, then you can often just, you could look it up in Rekordbox or type it in, and that way you could just type this in. But because this is a live track, it's not going to have like a defined tempo the entire time, which is like a little more work for us to, do. So I'm going to zoom in down here, and luckily the song just starts on 1, so it's easier. And I'm going to go, you see that Ableton has suggested some warp markers, and I'm going to just right click and set 1.1.1 here, essentially just telling Ableton this is the beginning of the song. Now when I hit play, it plays from there, which is good. And then here at the top, I'm going to turn on the metronome, and we can see how close we are to it being lined up. And a good way to think about the metronome is like that's your last track playing, and this is like the new song coming in, which like starting to get a little loosey-goosey, Now like embarrassing, and that's just like it's getting worse and worse. So what you want to do is I would hit this in broad strokes and not just immediately start like nudging every single beat into place, because most songs you should be able to kind of hit it in broad strokes and then just go fix little parts. So what I mean is that we have the power to just immediately start going note by note and like nailing those 3 kick drums, but like that is going to be a really labor-intensive proposition. So what I like to do first is usually kind of look at moments where it turns around, maybe 4-bar, 8-bar phrases, say like this, and just double click here, click and drag it and sneak it in. And then I'll go say maybe to the end of 8, And notice this is off. I'm just gonna push that here. And I'll just keep going here, keep nudging it, and we can just keep doing this. Cool. And depending on your goals, you might only need to warp the part that you would mix in over top of it, right? So it's like if your goal is just make this easier to DJ, I would just warp till like here, and then you can kind of leave all of this alone because you're not going to be mixing over top of it anyway, and then just kind of fast forward to the end of the track and make sure that's lined up too. But because we might have loftier goals with this, I'm going to keep going. And here we can even start getting maybe a bit more ambitious and kind of, you know, going in bigger chunks like 8-bar phrases and just double checking. Just make sure you're actually listening that it makes sense where the song kind of comes around or where the phrases are. Bump that one. Okay, now there's gonna be a really challenging part of the song. So we're gonna make sure. And so this part, I'm gonna be like the 4 on the floor kick drum goes away. It's like a really, really cool change that you also don't wanna ruin the vibe of by accidentally like warping it. So I'm just gonna be very careful around these special areas. This is also very likely like where I'm fully gonna be into this song. So I really don't wanna have a train wreck bad moment at the most kind of like, you know, pumped up moment of this track or the first time you're hearing it. So we're just gonna make sure this is really, really close. So cool. Listening for kicks, listening for snares or claps, that's like a really great way. Most tracks, either the kick is on, the snare is gonna land on 2 and 4, or if it's in halftime, you know, like a type beat or like rap beat kind of thing, it's gonna be on 3 a lot of the time. So just listen and like look for those patterns. And so here, it like misses the beat, so we gotta listen. Cool, so I'm just gonna stretch this way, and like here is really where the downbeat is, and I'm just gonna nudge all of these kind of where I see it might lining up. Make sure I didn't ruin it. So it's not like 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. You know, it might be in 3, 4. I go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And so you just might want to like do your homework on the track, kind of think about where it was made, how it was made, kind of what was happening maybe at that time. And, you know, make sure you have the right context for it. You could look up the sheet music. Yeah, question, Mike.
My question is, when you just did that, are you looking at the wave fluctuation to like manually quantize, or like, is that what you were kind of doing with that? Or?
Yeah, I'm gonna try and figure out like relate what I'm seeing to what I'm hearing. So these like big peaks in audio are called transients, and for a lot of music, the loudest moment is gonna be where the kick drum is and where the snare drum is. So we can kind of plot along by looking like, okay, like like that's gonna be the thing. And for this, when it comes around, I'm listening for when it kind of just picks back up in a normal way, and then I'm kind of looking up here to see, does that line up with the grid in a way that I would expect? And so you can see here, so like, I think the whole intro of the song is 64 bars, which like, that makes sense. A lot of tracks have like 8 bars, 16, 32 bar phrases. So that's already kind of lining up to something I'd expect. So that means that at the beginning of this bar should probably be the beginning of the verse. And so now I can listen and kind of just see what happens. 1, 2, 3, 4. And there's this kick drum actually normally would be here, but they just like make this really cool change. So they just play it late, but then the song from this point onwards is totally normal again, like snare, kick, snare, kick, snare. And it does actually all line up. There's just kind of a push from the end of this phrase here. So you just have to like get a sense of what you're lining up, which is usually gonna be the kick and snare, or like the drums, because they're keeping the tempo and timing of the track, or the best representation of it. And those also happen to be, when we're visualizing this, often the loudest part, which makes for a good thing to kind of stick it to. Cool. Any other questions about, what we've done so far?
Yeah, so like at each of those notches when you're warping them, are you like speeding it up? Are you slowing it down? Like what's happening when you're stretching them at each?
Cool. So yeah, great question. So if we go like say to the beginning of the track, what's happening with these is imagine you are pinning this spot in place, and then if I put something here, it's gonna stretch everything in the middle of it or condense it. So if I make a warp marker here and pull it out, you'll see that because there's a warp marker here, nothing here is gonna move. And because there's one here, it's gonna anchor that. So you'll hear it be all messed up. And then it goes back. So yeah, you are, which is brings you to a really good point, why it's really important that you move left to right. Because if you're kind of putting it back and forth, you're gonna undo work you did back and forth, because you'll be stretching it and then condensing it, stretching it, condensing it. So you really want to move from the beginning all the way through the track, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question?
I think so. I think I'm just trying to wrap my head around it, honestly.
Sure. So imagine just like we're sticking a pin in this beginning of the track, and I can stick a pin wherever I want and stretch it. And now that lasts as long as I want it to.
Okay, I see.
And so we could like really mangle this, alter the timing of it, and still actually have it line up. So if I was like, really. And you can really, really change the timing of it. We are using it in a very what I'd say like a mild corrective way, where we're just kind of be like, hey, this is a little early, this is a little late, and we're just going along and making sure it's on. And again, to kind of think about it is, imagine the metronome, which is Ableton's grid. We're saying like 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. Your previous song, if it's like a song that was made in Ableton, for example, is going to be nailed on that grid. So if we're DJing and mixing those two songs on top of each other, then we essentially, our goal is to be able to play this track with the metronome and it not train wreck, not. And there's still some beats that are like, a little bit off, like this one. And you're like, ooh. And it's up to you personally, like your preference and style of like how tight you need it to be. You might just be like, I just want this to be like a little bit better because like I just play it in and it's fine. But if you're like, ooh, I imagine myself doing like a really cool long blend with this, and it's gonna be looping and like on loop mode, on the CDJs, it's like probably you want it to be a little tighter. Or if we're gonna add new material to this, then we definitely need it to be a little tighter, because what we add in is gonna be on this grid. And if every like hit is a little bit off, we're gonna hear it go like, hear it flam. It won't sound good. But to start, you wanna hit the broad strokes, pay special attention to kind of problem areas, and then again, carry on with broad strokes. And it is just kind of tedious, but just part of the game. You just wanna go through and warp, ideally the entire track. This song is super long, so it's gonna take a long time. It's also like full of changes. It's a really tough one. It's really ambitious. Whereas something newer would likely be a lot easier. Any other questions about the warping and why we do it? Cool. So just as an example, or like for, kind of just to switch it up, I'm gonna grab a different track, much, much, much newer. Cool. Does anyone know this song is new? I'm going to assume that it's made at like a round number. I doubt, unless someone's trying to be really weird, I doubt that they're like typing in 95.35 as the tempo in your Ableton project, unless you hate DJs. But I'm going to assume like, okay, 95, that seems like a good bet. I'm going to hit warp, and now what I'm going to do is see, one, was I right? Maybe it's 96, maybe it's 94. And I'm just going to go hunt down that first downbeat. And this, because it doesn't have a drum right at the beginning, it has that kind of weird vocally intro. I'm just going to zoom in, and again, notice most songs will have a tiny bit of silence at the beginning of the track from the music making process, because when you send the stems out to be mixed and mastered, just as a safety so that it doesn't click a lot. Cool. So for this track, I would love, has kind of the opposite problem of the other track, which is that song has like a 2-minute intro. This song has a really short intro, at the beginning anyway. And I want to make this maybe longer, and maybe I want to speed up this song. Like, I'm gonna line up right here, and I'm gonna create a locator, and just say like, you know, verse 1. That's where that's coming in. And what I'd like to do now is like backfill this. And so in a super basic way now, let's listen. Changes between those two. I might even just loop these first 2 bars here and then kind of let it do that slight variation here. And so you could even do things like push the beginning of that other phrase here and have this as the end of the movements, you know, in new loops. But yeah, I'll probably just have it loop like this. That's cool. And then get into here. And then let's go to the end of the track. So what I'm going to do is just add a fade and just kind of taper this off here. Cool. Or you just leave it be. And that's fine too. So now we have this track pretty much as is. Maybe the next thing I want to do is like just speed it up a little bit. So maybe I'm going to put it to like 100 BPM, or maybe even 105. And now we have a nice long extended intro instead of 4 mic.
Would this also be called warping, or what is this called?
Warping is the process of lining up the transients of the track, so like the kicks, which I'll show you kind of what that sounds like. So just to hear what's going on. So when you imagine that like on a record player, if we slowed this track down, which would be in repitch mode, or sped it up a lot of the time because it changes the key of the song, makes it sound weird. Maybe you're mixing in key and that song now is in not a tunable key for you. So we probably want it on complex. And if you forget and keep it on beats, you might not notice if you're not changing the tempo. But if we're like slowing this down, I'll put it at 95. Nothing's happening. But if we slow it down, you start to hear this like, and that's because how it's filling in that space. Because if you think about it, we're stretching it. What's happening? Like what is being filled with that? And it's little loops of the song. And you can see on this mode, it's 2 arrows going opposite ways. And what it's doing is just to kind of magic, which is essentially this is like hitting master tempo on the CDJs or the decks, which is why you're able to change the tempo of a song and not have the pitch change, is because of the key lock or master tempo. So think about it like that. And yeah, if you are pretty much a safe bet is if you're making an edit, I would probably go with complex anytime you have musical information that you're messing around. And if you want to be more creative though, you could like definitely put it on repitch and like see just, again, this pushes it into a different territory but can be really fun, is thinking like, well, this song is so slow and it sounds really weird when I play it on complex at like 120. But what if there's like a vibe within this track where we just pitch it up and it sounds cool? So I could put the whole thing on repitch and just kind of play the track and keep speeding it up and see maybe it just sounds cool. Like in a particular key, you can just kind of like let it hang and do whatever you want. But if you want it to line up with actually being in a specific key, what you can do is look up. Just gonna grab this. I don't know why Chrome is so crazy slow. Cool. So you can figure out if you look at like, look up a calculator to figure out like when you say pitch it up by 10 BPM, how much that changes the key. What you can do is like look it up and try and figure out like, oh, if I did 20 BPM, it would be like 2 semitones or something. but it's still never going to line up perfect. But what you could do if you want it to like be faster and be pitched up, but still you know what key it is, I think a good way to do it is actually put it on repitch.
'Cause I don't wanna be blind with temptation.
Just listen to where it's at. So this can be really cool, and what it also tells you is that if you do want to speed it up and you're worried about it sounding kind of fucked up, by pushing it up 3 semitones, since that's what it naturally would happen, it's doing less work in the background. Like it's mangling the song a lot less if you're, say, speeding it up and pitching it up. If you're, say, speeding it up and pitching it down, you're really like defying physics, you know? And that's gonna sound probably the worst. So if we like pitch this down, and then also speed it up, we're not only like trying to keep it at 0, but do the opposite of what would happen. It's gonna usually sound bad, but Ableton's pretty cool. Any questions about that? In Ableton, there's no way to split like the vocals from the track, but there are instruments, or try and almost get a multi-stem version of the track. Obviously that'd be for maybe making a DJ tool or something like that. So that I'll get there soon. And let's see, let me just go to, sorry, having Chrome open, it really doesn't like. So I'm gonna go here. So let me open this for you. Cool. So yeah, that'll take us into remix territory. Kind of at the end of like on the end of the edit side, let's delete this. Another thing, going back to like the older tracks, and then we'll push it more into like remix territory, is I'm gonna take this, the Jackie Moore track. So this is nice because it's just drums. Cool, so before those drums come in, what I'm gonna do is I use an Ableton key command called insert and duplicate time, Shift Command D, and I'm gonna like push all this to the side and make more of an intro with just drums. So I'm gonna do Shift Command D, do that a few times. There, now I have 16 bars of just drums. And then I'm gonna go here and kind of just take a listen. Now I'm imagining like I could skip over the intro and do that, but just to kind of show you a vibe on adding and blending new parts, I'm going to go to this very intro part, and then I'm going to loop this section here. And here's where I'm going to need to be really specific about the warping, where I might, even painful as it is, like go lock in every kick drum or every beat to be as close as possible. Notice here, put the suggestion on the wrong spot. I'm gonna just double click anywhere to create a new one, pokes through. So we're gonna have to just force a slightly different loop. This is where it gets creative, like taking parts of the song and creating, you know, kind of loops and different stuff out of it, kind of using it as the source material. And I'm just gonna make sure all of these are really, really on here. This is where the bass line comes in. And now I have this. Cool. That's that loop. And what I'm going to do is just listen. Probably just repeat these 4 here. Nice. No one will ever know. And that way I don't have this kind of like every time, but it's kind of fun to have every 8 bars. So what I'm going to do is just kind of do that again here. And I like doing lots of stuff like this, like stretching it out. So now we have this little fill, like the little snare roll. It happens here, but just nothing happens. Here we just get straight, you know, kick snare, which is great. And then here this does what it's supposed to do. Start to be more creative with it. And so what I'm going to do now is add some extra drums. So songs from like 1978 doesn't have a big 909 kick drum or anything underneath. So I think it might be fun to go grab, we'll do it in a really classic way, is grab a 909 kit from Ableton and bring this in. And what I like to do is kind of listen to the drums and try and just like reinforce them with some drum machine sounds. And then that way, you know, we can have like, if you're doing it right, it's, again, this all depends on your taste, but in my mind, the first step, if you're doing it in a kind of way that no one's supposed to really notice, then you're really just like lining it up and matching. And so for me, that would be just putting a kick on every downbeat and a snare or a clap. Cool, so now we have like, you know, this big kick underneath. It's a little too big, so I'm gonna just chill it out a bit. Cool. And it has a clap too. We could add a clap. And it also has a hi-hat, so we could put a hi-hat on every beat. I'm just listening. Cool, and then I can adjust the velocity to make sure that they're not so obviously drum machine-y. Maybe you move the timing around, you know, to be a little bit off, so it sounds a little livelier. And we could also even try and recreate this fill. Sometimes I can take a little snippet of this and drag it down to Ableton's MIDI track, and it will convert it its best guess at the drums, which is pretty close. So I'm just gonna put that. Cool, we could even do that with the whole thing. I could put this here, see what Ableton comes up with. Crappier version of what we had, but you know, it can help give some insight. Cool, like that can, you know, that's almost it. And what I might do is, let's see, view, boom. Just gonna quantize all these, lock it into the grid, and let's see, I'm gonna go into this. I can split it, add in, let's see, take this out, add in the snare here. Oh, it's cool. And again, it can just be a way to like figure out, you know, what's happening there. Let's see how that goes. You can kind of like look at the MIDI as well, like look how it lines up. Probably it's not all these hats. Take this. And I'm just gonna duplicate these notes over. Cool, now they just work. Let's hear it with the track. Cool, so now it works like that. That works for me. I'm gonna duplicate this. And then that should also work, you know, over this part. Because without it, sounds really light now, you know? And you'll probably hear now that there will be moments where it's not worked as well because I didn't do it for this section and it'll be kind of off. But like I said, in a good way, if you do it in a way that it just kind of blends in, just sounds like beefed up now and like more modern, that's a totally valid thing to do. And you might just like have this going throughout the whole track, you know, and warp it. You could also start to add stuff to pick it up. Like maybe we want to add some hi-hats in for this section. And just so that, again, feels like more picked up. It's pretty damn close. Cool, so does that work so far? So what if you want, you know, you can then start to get, you know, go more interesting with it. So let's take some parts that have some vocals or other music, warp it, move it around, and let's see. You can also just listen and see how it goes with our new drums here. So maybe we need to pull back a little bit of this, and then we'll get the fill that actually leads into that section, so it's not so random. it's like, it's a pretty hard cut. So I think it's really important that you go find like, you know, these moments in the track that may lead well into each other, you know, or you can anticipate it well, and not just have it sound so, you know, hard and crashy. But that would be often the way to do it, is to like just sneak in chord markers here. And there's other ways. So we can start to alter this. And one of those ways would be like filtering the track. So like removing some frequencies to make it, you know, not come in so hard there. So what I'm going to do is go to my audio effects, grab auto filter, and I'm going to just play with having this kind of filtered and just see what it sounds like. Now you have more of my drums coming through. And maybe now when this new part comes in, it won't be so sudden. You know, it's like fits a lot nice. You could also have it, you know, like, since the bass comes through really nice with the filter, you could just definitely have it kind of rolling like this. And what I'm going to do is right click to show the automation, and I could record this in, or I can just kind of keep it like this, and it can just kind of slowly be getting unfiltered. And then I'll duplicate this and maybe have it kind of get, you know, slowly get out from under the filter. And then there's also moments you realize like, oh, maybe this can just be a closed hi-hat when it comes. So it's like more of an intro vibe here. And then maybe this is the moment we bring in the open hi-hat. You know, it's like maybe that's a nice vibe to have it in there instead. We're halfway through this to make that intro more interesting. Even tease that little hit of the horns kind of earlier on, maybe start to creep it in, you know, at the end of this phrase, and maybe even like let it go from under the filter just for that little moment. Let's see. And like that can be really nice to just, you know, tease stuff like that. Maybe don't do the snare roll. So it's like planting those seeds kind of earlier, working your way back will make it all make sense and feel less random. And here also I realize I'm gonna add the clap there, but I'm gonna keep the clap out for this whole area. And again, I'm just like, I'm looking for stuff that I can take in and out to make it feel like there's some kind of payoff, you know? Delete this. Cool. So now the clap's not going to come in until here, because then that way there's something new happening along with the original song when something new is happening. And it just makes it feel like whoever made it, when you're listening, it's more tuned in with the actual track and not so tacked on and random. You know, so I feel like there's just, oh, now there's a moment. We could also like have it tease and kind of come up a lot there, but then come back down. Very much an edit. Like you're not adding any real musical ideas, you know, it's just really adding drums and really creatively arranging it and looping it. And that, you know, that's cool. I think like that's a great thing. Then it's really bespoke. You know, you start to push it more and more custom, which I think is interesting. If you're playing, then it's like the less and less chances that other people have this. You know, it's more and more you. Any questions about that? Microphone over there. Oh, cool. Thank you.
So since you're adding elements to an already mastered track, do you have to go through and remaster this once you export it?
Yeah, I would definitely say this is a great question for all the edits. So what happens when you export them out of Ableton? you'll definitely want to do a very mild adjustment on the master, probably to just like make sure it's the same level as all your other tracks, which is usually just 0. So it's also can be good to squish these together a little bit. So I would kind of treat this like an original track, which is I would finish the song and ideally have 6 decibels of headroom and then like send it to someone to get it mastered, I think would be the move. But also, if you're just making quick edits for your DJ set, what you can do is actually just have it pretty tickling 0, like really, really close, and just put something like Ableton's like stock limiter and just have it like essentially just there as a safety. And maybe you're just, I'll turn it down. So maybe you have it so it's reading like this. Just like that. Like, so it's barely tickling it at all. And if anybody's like lost, really what this is doing is just turning up the song against the ceiling of 0, which is, I think for stuff like this that you're just trying to play it safe, you can obviously just turn it up on the decks, but you'd rather just do that than have it sound super fucked up. So you're gonna have this and just kind of, you know, tickle it, make sure it's at 0, and that's usually a good bet. Because when you're bringing it into Ableton, you'll probably want to turn it down. And like you said, it's already mastered, so it's already at 0. So like I have my Ableton default, so any track I bring in is at -6. And then all the new stuff I add is obviously going to make it louder again. So that way you're not fighting about it clipping or redlining in the master. But for something like an edit, I would probably just do this, where it's just like, just back to 0, really. Cool, any questions before we go to the last phase? Cool. Okay, so now I'm gonna dig into like what happens when you push the edit and get really carried away with it, which I think is really cool. So I'll open up this project for you, and that way I won't have to make it live. Cool. So for this track, this is me definitely adding musical material and really changing the vibe of it. This would go into more like, I would call like a bootleg remix, meaning it's not official. There's 0 chance it could ever come out officially because there's no way that I can get it, get it through the proper channels. Although in a cool way that's like reminiscent of SoundCloud like 10 years ago, because of the power of like TikTok, a lot of bootleg remixes are getting released officially after the fact. And the very first edit I played you actually was a bootleg edit on YouTube that just got so popular, they were like, oh, let's just put it out for real. And that's actually really nice. And like people like Billie Eilish are putting out whole stems and like, acapellas, even though there's no like call to action on the other end of like how you would ever put that out. And also lots of it might get taken down on SoundCloud and shit because the label still doesn't want it out. But I think there is like a shift, and like I hope that, as just because of the like deluge of stuff with things like La 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 and other vocal splitters and stem splitters, because remixes are just back to being a thing, hopefully there will be a better path to putting it out. But for now, it's in this funny thing where like everyone obviously has fun doing them, has fun playing them, the artists themselves want you to do it, and then there's just no real good like solution on the other end of how that comes out. So here's me. I took the vocals using La La La. I split them from the original, and let me find what it sounded like. So here's what it sounded like. So I loaded up the original Yes and into La La La, and it gave me the instrumental. Pretty good. And then the vocal separate.
Somebody or something we don't see just right.
Notice it has that weird kind of
Come on, put your lipstick on.
but there's just, right now, that's just how they're all gonna sound. That's about as good as it gets. So here's what I came up with for this track, which is definitely much farther than an edit. Oh, let me just up my buffer size. Cool. So this is really simple as a track in terms of what a track would be, but it's the Ariana vocal with tons of effects, loops, so I'm changing the arrangement of it, and then also added drums, added bass, added this crazy acid lead to make it into something that would fit into my sets, which would be like ravier stuff. Cool. So, yeah, that's like, I feel like pushing it further. Does that, any questions about that? Yeah.
So when you bringing in all these different stems, do you go through and warp each of them individually?
So yeah, so this one, the only stem I have is the original, is the vocal split that I got from running it through the vocal splitter. And then these are drums, like drum breaks that I added in.
So I guess with vocals, how do you, since you don't have to kick and snare?
Yeah, vocals are much harder to warp, which is why I skipped to this. So the best thing for warping vocals to do is actually bring in the original track, warp it, bring in the acapella, and line it up right on top before you start warping it. Because otherwise it can be a nightmare. Because the vocals, like, very, very often don't just start on like, hi, I'm the vocal. You know, it's like gonna be all over the place. So that can be a really tough thing. So that's like the next level of warping, is warping acapellas. And my advice to you is warp the original and then warp the acapella to the original, and that will really help. Or something like La La La, it will give you the instrumental, load them both up. It'll be way easier to warp them like that. It'll make a lot more sense. And so with this, you can see I put like some effects on it. So the original, the warped acapella, and sped it up. What is cool?
Yes.
Sounds like this.
And
I have all these effects on it, like crazy delays to like fill out space. And then really simple, this drum break that I kind of mangled, this one. And then I just figure out what key the song was in and wrote a new bass line. And then this 303 kind of sound is playing an arpeggiator based on those bass notes. So. Notice like I'm not using a lot of the track. I just used my favorite little part of it and then tried to make like heartbeat. And then there's these kind of chop parts of it. Cool. So that's like a resample of her voice being distorted and then pitched up in the same arpeggio. Yeah, question. Yes and by Ariana Grande. Yeah. Yes and. So anyway, that's, yeah, for me, like, it's still a lot more simple than like an original track. But for me, like a really fun way to interact with it. And then maybe I'll bring in a more, as like a final thing, pushing it even further. of just like what an edit could be is this. Find it for you. Cool. One sec. Ooh, sorry, might not have it. Sec, right track. Feel like it's a good example though. That's okay. Right track. Sig, give me 30 seconds. There we go. Oh, found it. Cool. So, really love. Hopefully this is the right one. Ooh, might not work. Let me just download it. Sorry, I had to download it from Dropbox, make it available offline. So yeah, this is an example where like starting to like pitch it up, change the key, add new parts, make it way more of an original, loop a lot of stuff, push it pretty far, kind of as far as possible. And just give me a sec. So yeah, while that loads, any other questions like at all making edits or getting started making edits?
If there is a part in a song that is just trash that you want to take out, like I found this amazing edit of a song that has like a really weird pitched like vocal in certain parts that I want to get rid of. I mean, I guess you just like copy 4 bars and go over it. I don't know, but I was curious if you had any advice.
Is it you're talking like it's in the middle of parts? Like yeah.
It's, like, random.
You could, I mean, you could, depends how ambitious you are. You could say, do something like split the vocal out, see if it comes with it, go snip it out of all the vocal parts, and then put them back together. And that way you would have like control over it. Oh. Okay. And yeah, that was gnarly. Probably there's an audio track in this that's has this live. Let's see. So you could do that, or you could, like you said, is say it's like happens at the end of every bar. You take a bar that doesn't have it and just cut that in over and over again every time it happens. And that's like a good example of. I have a track like that I've always wanted to make an edit because it has a really cool. It's a really cool track that has just like a terrible feature, and there's no original without it. Or not terrible, it just doesn't fit with the vibe I would want. So it's like a really sexy song.
You make my eyes roll crazy. You make my hips shake right to left.
I should have used this for the class so I could have it. But it made me think of this right away, like you saying that. So it's like this.
I didn't need to let you in. But now I got this feeling.
So good. And then great.
Baby, there's no need that mind sometimes goes to a place.
I was just like, just like, yeah, it's just like the song was so good, and they're like, let's get this guy in the mix, and it's just like there's no version without it. So here's the kind of last one, a different way to do it. This one's mostly about really fine-tuning the drums and like really lining up all the drums and the groove from the track, and then adding some fun effects, really looping it like crazy. And I'll play it for you. It's an edit of Sid and Simo right track, so it's our wrong track edit. Maybe you know the original. Turn this off. So we like sped the song up, pitched it up. Does everyone know the original? I'll play it for you after, it's really good. I have 2 copies of it for a few reasons. So it combines kind of everything we talked about.
Baby, I'ma need your trust. If we're gonna be in love, but you and me in love. I just wanna see you love. Tell me if it's all too much, cause we don't really need to rush. I think you could be the one. I think you and me could stop. Baby, I'ma need your trust.
Loop that part again because it's so good. Why not just hear it again with drums?
I just wanna see you love. Tell me if it's all too much, cause we don't really need to rush. I think you could be the one. I think you and me could stop. Baby, I'ma need your trust.
Loop it again. It's good every time. And the song has really short sections, so just repeated them. And then had to like make a break out of it because there's no real breakdown in the song. It's just like cut it, filter everything. And just again, find a cute loop.
You granted me access to that ass, I won't take it for granted. My last in slow motion, my man said I didn't change. Well, it did the rest.
Yeah, so and like this is an example where we took the bass from the song and like, because it didn't split it or anything, we just took the bass from the song and like filtered it so that the parts where I wanted the song to have bass, I just used the original track, filtered down the bass and put it only in the parts where I wanted, and then in the rest of it, the other sample has all the bass cut out of it so that we could make more changes throughout instead of being locked to when the bass was in, which was I think the entire time in the track. So it was like I picked a part where it had a really clean take of the bass line, and then that way, notice the bass is cut out of this, and this is just the bass from the song. Together they should sound more or less like the song. Little altered on purpose, and then layered together with our, and then trying to be creative in like, cool. So just, trying to be creative of like, the song had a few little sections we wanted to use and just like pull that into a whole track. And then, it's like more of a remix, but still kind of somewhere in the middle, And that's like the perfect thing for us to be like, just play in our sets and then put on SoundCloud is like, here's our edit of this. Cool.